Hey there, this is Clay with modernlove.life, and this is the Relationship Inner Game Experience. Here we are, episode 5. We're getting up there. And today I actually want to talk about something that we talked about a long time ago on our previous podcast. And this is going to be something that's kind of important, especially for folks who want to get back together with their ex. And this is about the 5 stages of getting back together. Specifically, the 5 stages that your ex goes through when getting back together with you, okay? Because you see, there's a spectrum of emotion that keeps your ex from actually wanting to get back together with you. And as your ex shifts from not wanting to get back together with you at all to eventually opening up to the idea and wanting to actually get back together with you, they're going to go through a certain emotional process. And if you are aware what's coming, you'll kind of know where your ex is in this process, and you'll know how to respond when you hit some of these obstacles and some of these behaviors along the way that will eventually come up in many cases, okay? So let's get into this. And before we get into this though, I really need to explain a simple concept, and that concept is called emotional reactance. Now, emotional reactance, it's a word that most people don't know, the word reactance. But if you think about it, it's really kind of that resistance that you have to interacting with somebody, to wanting to be near somebody or wanting to talk to somebody. You know, often we get this feeling of emotional reactance when it comes to door-to-door salesmen, or people that are trying to get us to donate money to some sort of charity or some sort of organization that we don't particularly resonate with, right? And it's not that there's anything wrong with these activities, it's just that we know that the other person has a hidden agenda. We know that that person has their own agenda, whether that's selling more vacuum cleaners, whether that's raising, thousands of dollars for some kind of cause, or whether that's trying to get back together with your ex. And if your ex is resistant towards getting back together with you, or resistant to even talking to you, or resistant to even texting with you, or resistant to interacting with you in some way or another, there's a very high chance that there is some degree of emotional reactance. And we can measure this on a scale. It's not a real scale. It's not like there's an actual machine we can go out there and scan your ex with and say, the reactance is at 86%. We can't do that. But it helps to conceptually think about it as a scale from 0 to 100, okay? Now, if your ex has 0 reactance whatsoever, they have pretty much no resistance towards wanting to get back together with you. And basically, if you just asked, hey, do you want to get back together? They would probably say, yeah, I want to get back together with you, right? But I'd imagine that's probably not the case if you're watching this particular video or this particular podcast. If your ex has 100% reactance, if it's at 100, then this means that your ex absolutely doesn't want anything to do with you. If you call them, they will not answer the phone. If you text them, they will not text you back. If you text them 10 times, they might respond with, stop texting me, or something like that, right? And that is a very, very high level of reactance. And there's this big ocean in between of, 25, 50%, 75%, all of the numbers in between, right? And at certain points in this process from 0 to 100, you will experience different responses from your ex. It's also important to know that not everybody is going to start with their ex at 100% reactance, okay? If you went through a pretty amicable, pretty friendly breakup with your ex's reactance to you might only be maybe 50% to start with. And then maybe it gets lower and lower and lower as you start to move through the 5 stages. But if you do the wrong things, that we all know that you shouldn't do if you're trying to get back together with your ex, such as begging, such as pleading, such as promising up and down that you've changed, such as grand romantic gestures, writing love poems, and things like that, you're only going to increase your ex's emotional reactance. And if they were at, say, 50% to start with, that 50% might start to turn to 60%, 70%, 80%. If you're not careful, it could go to 90% or 100%, okay? So you have to understand that how you bring yourself to the interaction and how you relate to your ex is either going to increase or decrease their reactance. And keep this in mind, because if you want their reactance to be low, to be 0, so that you can get back together again, then the choices that you make and the things that you do or don't do are going to be very important. Okay, so now that you understand that, let's go ahead and get into the 5 stages of getting back together. Now, let's just say that you had a very, very bad breakup with your ex, and the reactance level has gone right up to 100, either because of the breakup or because of some mistakes that you made directly after the breakup, you know, begging, pleading, all that stuff. But somehow their reactance level is very high, it's 100. Now, in this first stage of getting back together, the reactance is probably going to be somewhere between 80 and 100%. And this stage is called the wall of reactance. And when your ex is at this first stage, the wall of reactance, their reactance is very high towards you, and their willingness to interact with you is very low. Okay? So this is where you often get a lot of the stuff where, you know, you text them, they don't text you back. You call them, they don't answer the phone. You leave them a voice message, they don't respond to the message, right? Your ex is just kind of walling you out. And what's happening here is that your ex has this very high level of reactance towards you. And when you contact them, when you're interacting with them, when you're reaching out to them, they are not wanting to interact with you. They just don't want it. They've been pushed too far and they're just kind of walling you out. That's why it's called the wall of reactance. Now, it's important to know that reactance can be lowered by 2 main things. The first is time. You know, if you give somebody time, their emotions might settle down a little bit and they might be more willing and open to talk to you again. However, time is not really something that we can really control, which is why we often look instead to the second thing that can decrease reactance, which is the way that you're approaching your ex, right? So oftentimes people say something like, hey, I texted my ex, but they didn't respond to me. I called my ex, but they didn't respond to me. What do I do? And it's like, well, what did you text your ex? What did you say to your ex, right? Because what you say or how you say it is actually very important. You know, there are things that you could do or say that are going to increase reactance and make somebody not want to respond to you. And there are things that you can say that are going to decrease reactance and make it more likely that somebody will respond to you, right? So for example, there's a big difference between something like, hey, I want you to text me back, you jerk, right? That's something that's probably going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to respond to that one. That person wasn't very nice, right? And so that's not going to get a response, and it's going to possibly even increase their reactance. However, something along the lines of, hey, I was just thinking about you today, and I know it's been a while, but I was wondering, did you do anything to celebrate that special thing that you said was coming up? Something like that might be a little bit more understanding, a little bit softer, a little bit more empathetic, and it might decrease the reactance and actually encourage them to want to respond to you, okay? And so in the way that you bring yourself to the interaction, in the way that you contact your ex, in the way that you interact with your ex, you actually can increase or decrease reactance. So that's very important as well too. And when it comes to wall of reactance, you have to just start to chip away at that wall through empathetic, through understanding, through compassionate messages or conversations or gestures like the one that I just gave you, okay? And this is where those advanced relational skills really come into play. You have to be able to see the world from your ex's point of view. You have to be able to empathize with where your ex might be at. You have to be aware of what your ex's emotional state is and be able to respond to that and align yourself to that in a way that's congruent, okay? And of course, you absolutely have to have composure and integrity when it comes to how you bring yourself without having to posture, you know, pretending to be impenetrable and way cooler and unaffected than you really are, or collapsing and just kind of, you know, going with the flow. Yeah, whatever you want, I'm totally cool with it. You know, you make the choices, you set the tone, you take the lead, I'm down for whatever, all of that stuff, right? But instead just being completely honest and forthright and true about what's important to you. Anyway, that's the first stage. That's the wall of reactance. Now, if your ex's reactance is in a range of, say, 60 to 80%, okay, you're at actually the second stage, which is where your ex is at the test drive. Now, when your ex is in the test drive stage, you know, you can contact them and they will probably contact you back, right? You can text them, they'll probably text you back. You can call them, they'll probably return your call, or they might text you back instead because it's easier or whatever, right? But they will respond to you. However, the response is going to be shorter. It's going to be maybe a one-word response or a very blunt, not very emotionally invested response. You know, you might get responses like, I'm doing good. Today's nice. Thanks for asking. Or, it was okay. Just simple things like that. And it's really hard to kind of, sink yourself into that emotional state and really have an engaging conversation when you're having conversations like, how are you? I'm good. How was your day? It was okay. What was the event like? It was fine. There's not really a whole lot of dialogue going on there, if you know what I mean. And so at this point, what you want to do is you want to show your ex that it's absolutely safe and okay to interact with you, that you're not going to have that hidden agenda, that you're actually going to be more focused on the connection rather than the relationship, rather than the goal, rather than the outcome, rather than your hidden agenda of getting back together. We've talked about this before, but you really want to be more connection focused than relationship focused, because you probably want the connection more than you want the relationship. You want to get back together with your ex because you think that getting back together is going to give you all kinds of connection and love and bonding and all of that stuff. You probably don't want to get back together just for the sake of getting back together, just for the sake of saying, I am in a relationship, check the box, move on to the next thing, right? You probably don't want that. You want it because you think it's going to bring you passion and love and all of the wonderful things that come with having a great relationship. And if that's the case, don't fool yourself into thinking that you should go for the relationship. Actually go for what's most important, which is the connection, right? That's how we do it with dating. That's how we do, you don't go on a first date and say, so, are we boyfriend and girlfriend yet? You don't do that, no. You actually take the time and say, hey, what are you like? Here's what I'm like. Here's what I'm into. What are you into? And you actually have a conversation and you see if there's a connection there. That's how you want to go about it when it comes to your ex as well, too. So you're at this stage, the second stage, the 60 to 80% reactance stage. Your ex is responding to you, but they're not giving you much to go on. Now here's the part where you want to shift down from the surface level communication, things like, how are you doing? Did you see the thing on TV? Is the guy from work still bugging you? All of that stuff, right? You can shift down from the surface level communication down to emotional communication. And you do this through the conversational and advanced relational skills that we teach inside of our courses, like the advanced, like the X Solution program, or Loving Boldly, or Dating Bravely, okay? Now, once you're able to actually shift down to the emotional level and have real, substantial, emotional interactions with your ex, they're going to start to sense that the connection between the two of you is actually there, that they can actually talk to you. And it's not going to be about you begging and pleading to get back together. It's not about you trying to make some sort of case or argument for giving the relationship a second shot or anything like that. It's just going to be the two of you hanging out. It's just going to be the two of you connecting. It's going to be the two of you just bonding, like maybe you did on your first date, or maybe your second date, or back when the two of you were first falling in love. And as this happens, your ex is going to start to relax a little bit around you. They're going to start to say, yeah, maybe I didn't have to be so resistant to talking to them. Maybe I can just kind of open up and be myself. And their reactance is going to start to decrease a little bit more. And that's going to bring you to the third stage of getting back together, which is called riding the dragon. And this happens when their reactance is between 40 and 60%. And if you notice, what happens between 40 and 60% is a special number, and that number is 50%. And what is 50%? That is half. That's right in the middle. And what happens is at 50%, your ex's negative emotional state towards you, which we call reactance, is 50%. And their positive emotional state towards you, which is what we're building here through these good positive interactions, is at 50%. And when this happens, these two forces are in balance. They're in equilibrium, right? And so it's sort of like a teeter-totter, or it's sort of like one of those balance scales, where it's kind of just teetering back and forth. And one thing on one side or the other could be enough to shift the balance this way or shift the balance this way, okay? The reason why this is important to know is because when you're at this stage, riding the dragon, you're going to get a lot of hot and cold behavior from your ex. You're likely going to get a lot of mixed messages, mixed signals from your ex. And this isn't because your ex is toying with you, probably not, unless they're an evil person, in which case, do you really want to get back together with them? But they're probably doing this because they're actually genuinely confused themselves. Keep in mind, this gauge of their emotional reactance towards you is their compass, their emotional compass that's telling them and driving them and compelling them to act and behave in certain ways. And if they're right at that 50% mark or near about it, they're going to be very confused. they're not going to know if they want to move towards you or away from you, towards you or away from you. And it could be anything that's going to shift them one way or another. It could be the way that you phrased a text message. It could be the way that you didn't phrase a text message. It could be something that you said. It could be something that you didn't say. It could be things that are completely out of your control entirely. Like maybe they weren't even with you and they were out with a friend and that friend said, hey, I never really did like your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, or, I always did like your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, or something like that. And that can just suddenly change your ex's opinion in just that tiny little amount that makes them shift just a little bit more, okay? And when your ex is at riding the dragon, you will get this hot and cold behavior. You'll get stuff like, hey, I'm sorry, I think we might be able to want to get back together in the future, or maybe I just need a little bit more time to think about it, I just don't know yet, or things along those lines, right? You're getting substantial responses from your ex, meaningful responses from your ex, and sometimes they seem warm like this, but then maybe the next day or shortly after they pull back and they say, hey, I'm sorry, I didn't want to get your hopes up, I think we should just be friends. I think maybe breaking up with us was a good idea. Maybe we really should date other people. And then, the day after that, they might say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean that. Please, let's go out on a date. I'll be extra nice. Maybe we'll even, get a little intimate later on or something like that. And so there's this back and forth that happens when you're at this riding the dragon stage. And the important thing at this point is to not get pulled into your ex's emotional confusion. Okay, if you get pulled into their emotional confusion, it's going to tie you in knots as you're trying to figure it out, as you're hanging on every word that your ex says. Don't get pulled into that. Just understand that they are confused and just stay focused on what you want. Stay focused on having high quality emotional connections with your ex, okay? As long as you continue to beat down that reactance and build up the positive emotions towards your ex, you're going to eventually get to the fourth stage. That fourth stage is called the crisis point, okay? Now, oftentimes people get very excited about being at the crisis point, even though it's not really something that's very exciting to be at, although it can be exciting, but maybe not in a good way. It's called the crisis point because at this point, their reactance is down to 20 to 40% reactance, okay? So the majority of them likes you emotionally. There's very little bit of that emotional reactance left, that resistance left. And at this point, your ex knows that they have very strong positive feelings for you. Your ex is unable to deny that any longer. They can't veil it with confusion or anything like that. It's very clear to them. However, they don't feel very ready to make that jump to being in a relationship with you again. They're not emotionally ready. Maybe they still have hang-ups or concerns on their part. Maybe there's some external things that are going on in their life that are keeping them from making that decision. Like, maybe they're in a rebound relationship with somebody new, right? They don't want to break up with that person until they're really sure. After all, they broke up with you and then they ended up in this relationship with somebody else. How silly would it seem if they broke up with that second person as well and then got back together with you and it didn't work either, and then they had a third breakup and then they were just like lost and everyone was like, oh, well, that's the person that's just always breaking up. They're in one relationship this week and then they're out the next week. And they don't want to think of themselves as that way, so they want to make sure that this is the right choice. So they're holding off and they're kind of pushing back as they're approaching this crisis. They're coming up to this crisis where they have to make a decision. Are they going to get back together with you, or are they not going to get back together with you? Are they going to create the space in their life to explore what's possible with you, or are they not going to do that, okay? And as they get closer and closer to this crisis, they might start to do things like actively discourage you, even though they like the connection that they have with you. They might say things like, we should just date other people. You're too good for me. Things along those lines, right? And that's kind of what that means. It's like, I'm trying to take the pressure off of me to make this decision, because if you just didn't want to get back together with me, then I wouldn't have to make this decision and I wouldn't be in this difficult point where I have to, maybe go out and tell all my friends and family that, hey, we're getting back together, after they just, after I finally worked up the courage to tell them that we broke up and they spent the past month or two trash talking you, right? I don't want to have to go back to them and kind of say, well, yeah, so, my ex that we all agreed was a jerk, well, yeah, we're getting back together again, right? That's kind of a little bit embarrassing. And so they don't want to make this choice unless they're absolutely sure. And so in order to take the pressure off of them from actually having to make this choice, they want you to make the choice for them. They're trying to get you to disqualify yourself by saying, oh, well, we should date other, you should really date other people. They're hoping that, part of them is hoping that you say no, but part of them is hoping that you say, yeah, all right, maybe we should date other people. It's kind of like a test, you know what I mean? Or like, you're too good for me. They're kind of like saying, well, if you really did believe you were too good for me, then we wouldn't be in this situation and I wouldn't have to make this hard choice, okay? That's the crisis point. And at this point, not earlier, not back at wall of reactance, not at test drive, not at riding the dragon, but only at this point, you can draw a line in the sand and tell your ex, no, I don't want to date other people. I'm into you, and I want to be with you. So I'm not going to date other people. Or, I don't think you're too good for me. I think you are the right person for me. Besides, with a knowing, little mischievous grin, I can be a little bit bad too. Or something like that, right? Again, you only want to do this at the crisis point. If you do it earlier, if you do it prematurely, very bad things will happen, okay? Don't do it beforehand. Please, don't do it beforehand. If you remember anything, don't do it beforehand, okay? And what this is going to do is it's going to keep the pressure on your ex. It's going to force them to confront what they actually want, which is to continue to develop this strong connection with you. It's going to help them put more trust, more faith in what the two of you have, so that they know if they break up with the rebound. They know if they finally make the move and move back in with you. They know that if they tell other friends and family that they're getting back together, that they know if they rearrange their life in some way, that it's not going to be a mistake. Okay? And if you can do this, if you can get past the crisis point, you'll be at that last stage, the fifth stage. This is called new beginnings. This is where your ex's reactance is from 0 to 20%. Your ex may still have a few hesitations, a few little concerns about getting back together with you, and those are the last little bits of reactance. It's like, well, what's going to be different about things this time, right? I enjoy interacting with you and this is fun, but we did end up in a breakup last time. What's going to be different? How are we going to keep ourselves from ending up in that same dynamic, right? And at this point, you can actually talk about getting back together with your ex, and you can directly talk and address how you can make the relationship work in the long run, okay? Because their reactance is lower, because they're much more open to talking about this. They're much more emotionally open and emotionally ready and emotionally excited about getting back together with you. They can talk about how the two of you are actually going to have a successful relationship together. What are you going to need to do? Are you going to be able to spend more time connecting with one another? Are you going to be able to prioritize your relationship more? Are you going to be able to not work so much? Are you going to be able to not be so influenced by your friends? Are you going to be able to keep your word more? I don't know exactly what it is that might be your ex's concern, but this is where you can talk about it. And at this point, this is also where you can actually reduce that last little bit of reactance and have your ex feel comfortable and completely excited and completely ready to get back together with you. And that's the fifth stage, new beginnings. Okay, so again, we have these 5 stages: wall of reactance, test drive, riding the dragon, crisis point, and new beginnings. Along the way, the most important thing is to focus on the quality of the emotional connection that you have with your ex. Along the way, the emotional connection and the quality of the interactions you have are the most important thing. They're more important than who's texting who. They're more important than who is initiating contact with who. They're more important than whether or not your ex is in a rebound relationship. They're more important than whether your ex is upset or not upset. They're more important than anything else, okay? I literally say this all the time, and I literally mean it. Your ex's emotional connection with you is the most important thing in getting back together again, okay? If you want your ex to want to get back together with you, the emotional connection is the most important thing. I do not say that lightly, but I mean this 100%. Okay, you do not need to focus on text messages. You do not need to focus on Facebook activity. You do not need to focus on your ex being in a rebound relationship. You do not need to focus on your ex wanting to be just friends. You do not need to focus on any of that. As long as you focus on the quality of the emotional connection between the two of you, everything else will take care of itself, okay? So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you are interested in getting back together with your ex, we do have a course. Again, it's called the Ex Solution Program. You can find out more about that at modernlove.life/ESP, modernlove.life/ESP. E as in Echo, S as in Sierra, P as in Paul. Okay? You can go ahead and find out about that over there. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this relationship inner game experience. If you like this, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and go ahead and leave a comment down below. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into our question and answer for today. Clyde writes in and says, 2 weeks ago, I asked you about rebound relationships and how a common case for women is to seek validation in that kind of relationship. If I understand correctly, they may chase the man, and if they get him, that proves their value. It got me thinking about what happens when a man like me chases a woman who isn't completely emotionally available. I wonder if it could have the opposite effect. That is, if she ends up in a relationship with me because I pursued it, from her perspective, it might feel like she achieved it effortlessly, as if she did nothing to deserve that love. Could this leave her feeling like she has settled too easily? This has to do with a lot of advice about dating that I've heard, according to which women need to feel challenged in order to fall in love. I'd like to know more about your opinion about all of this. Thank you. Okay, Clyde, so when it comes to this idea of challenge, and this applies both to men and women, this is not like just specific to one gender, because women also have this belief that men need to be the pursuer, that men only like the thrill of the chase, and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But really, at the end of the day, it's not that people don't like being pursued or don't want to be pursued, or vice versa, or want to be pursued or don't. But all of this has to do with the idea of having something given to you for nothing. Okay? So, for example, it's one thing to flirt with somebody and to say, wow, the way that you just talked about your art and what you're passionate about is really moving to me, and I think that that's incredibly sexy, and I would love to get to know you more and take you out for coffee. Are you free on Thursday? That's one thing to say that. But it's another thing to say, hey, you're beautiful. You want to go out on a date with me, right? That is something that is unearned. Whereas, somebody expressing themselves and talking about maybe something they're passionate about, or sharing some aspect of their personality, or sharing, something of that magnitude where they're pretty much investing something into the interaction, or investing something of themselves into some sort of dynamic between the two of you. That is the kind of thing where you can, where they are actually an active participant in sculpting the direction that the interaction goes. So, that's why I prefer to flirt with people during relate reward cycles, because when you do the relate, you are actually encouraging that person to share more about themselves. You're actively engaging with them, and you are actively reflecting back something on them that you find attractive, something that you are fascinated with, something that really moves, or inspires you, etc. And that is something that they had to work, even if it's just a little bit, to earn. Therefore, that is the kind of compliment, that is the kind of something that comes with them putting skin in the game as well too. So it's a mutually created experience, right? Whereas, for example, women often complain about men catcalling at them. They walk by, I don't know, just like as a cliche example, a construction site, and all these guys are like, "Woo, yeah, looking nice, baby. Oh yeah," all that stuff, and that is generally not welcomed by women, because the woman has done absolutely nothing to earn that kind of praise. I mean, sure, maybe she woke up in the morning and put on a nice outfit or whatever, but she actually didn't engage in that conversation. It's not like she was putting on the outfit saying, I'm going to go and see this construction site, and all these guys are going to, whoop and holler at me because I'm wearing this really provocative, nice outfit or something like that. She just put it on because that's what she felt like wearing that day, and just the path of her day happened to lead her by that site, the construction site, where all those people just happened to give her some attention. That kind of attention was not earned. That kind of interaction, she put zero effort into the interaction. Therefore, she has no perceived value in that interaction, okay? And Do you see the difference between that? So when it comes to, for example, you pursuing a woman, she will take it as being something of value if it is something that she works together with you to co-create. That is to say, if she is able to bring herself to the interactions that you have, if she is able to express her personality, if she is able to express who she is, and importantly, if you are able to appreciate and acknowledge those aspects of her, then it will be something that she does value, okay? So you might say, if she expresses some interest in art or something like that, you might say, because you've expressed such a strong interest in art, I thought we could go out on our next date to this art museum or something along those lines. And that is her actually, in a certain way, playing an active role in the interaction, in how it unfolds, okay? And of course you are too, by planning the date and all of that stuff. But you're not just asking her out on some sort of bland, typical date. You're not just throwing yourself at her. You're not just, bending over backwards to want to create some sort of relationship with her, and she's just kind of sitting there. That's the kind of thing that people often take for granted. And those types of relationships, those types of dating situations, it often does not feel good on an emotional level to the recipient of such praise, to the recipient of such advances, because that person has put no investment into the dynamic. And therefore, it seems lopsided, and it's not in accordance with what we call the investor strategy in our courses, okay? Remember, you want to have a more or less equal amount of investment, okay? And it's not always going to be equal. Sometimes you're going to have more invested, sometimes she's going to have more invested. But, it's a matter of slowly upping the ante so that the stakes are more or less equal on each side, okay? That's why it's important to actually follow that investor strategy. So, Clyde, I hope this helps you out, and please keep us updated on how things go moving forward from here. All right, so that was the Q&A for this week. With that being said, thanks again so much for watching. Thanks again so much for listening. And if you've liked this, once again, give us a thumbs up, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. And once again, if you are interested in getting back together with your ex, please feel free to check out modernlove.life/ESP for the X Solution program. And if that seems like it's a good fit for you, I welcome you and invite you to sign up. You'll learn about more things, such as the 5 stages of getting back together, and how to really develop the advanced relational skills you need to continue to have positive interactions with your ex moving forward. Talk to you next time.